All right, let's get you ready for your exam. We're going to do a deep dive into the Seminci, Vig, and Vulpin paper, a classic that connects two worlds you might not think are related, labor laws and corporate debt. Sounds a bit strange, right? How can rules about hiring and firing people possibly affect a firm's decision to issue bonds? Well, that's the big puzzle, and this paper cracks it wide open. Let's get into it. Okay, so the whole study really boils down to this one central question. It builds a bridge between two parts of a company that usually operate in totally different universes. HR and the chief financial officer's office. The question seems simple on the surface, but the answer is incredibly profound. Why would making it harder to fire workers actually change a company's capital structure? I mean, at first glance, the link isn't obvious at all, but that's the genius of this paper. The authors found a brilliant and super clean way to connect the dots between a country's social policy and a firm's most fundamental financial strategies. To really understand their argument, we first have to do a quick review of the two basic types of risk that every single company has to manage. Think of it as a constant balancing act between the risk from its day-to-day business and the risk from how it pays for all of its assets.
First up is what we call operating leverage. This is all about the risk that's baked right into a company's cost structure. If you have a ton of fixed costs, we're talking big things like rent on a massive factory or hefty executive salaries that have to be paid no matter what, then you have high operating leverage, and that's risky. It means even a tiny dip in your revenue can cause your profits to absolutely plummet.
And on the other side of the coin, you've got financial leverage. This one's pretty straightforward. It's the risk you take on when you borrow money. The more debt you pile on, the more fixed interest payments you're on the hook for, period. Miss those payments, and you could be heading straight for bankruptcy. So yeah, debt is a powerful tool, but it adds a whole other layer of risk. Now, here is the absolute key concept you need to nail for your exam. These two types of risk aren't separate. A firm has to think of them together, like weights on a scale. It has a total risk budget. So if a company is already really risky on the operations side because of high fixed costs, it just can't afford to also take on a mountain of debt. It's a balancing act. Too many fixed costs of any kind, whether from your factory or from your bank, makes a company brittle and fragile. Okay, now that we've set the stage with risk, let's bring labor back into the story. This is where the paper introduces its brilliant core idea, what they call the crowding out hypothesis. And it starts with a simple question. What if strict labor laws create a kind of hidden off-balance sheet debt for a firm? So how does that work? The logic is actually incredibly clear. Step 1, a country passes some really strict employment protection laws, or EPL, that make it super expensive and legally messy to lay off workers. Step 2, all of a sudden your labor costs are no longer a flexible variable expense you can dial up or down. They become rigid. They start to act just like a fixed cost, like paying rent. And as we just established, when your fixed costs go up, what happens? Your operating leverage, your fundamental business risk, goes right up with them. And this quote from the paper just nails it. The inflexible labor contract becomes a debt-like obligation. Your company's total risk has now shot up. So if you're the CFO, what do? You have to bring that total risk back down to a manageable level. And the easiest lever you can pull is financial debt. You simply borrow less. In essence, this new labor debt crowds out the traditional financial debt. One goes up, so the other must come down.
Okay, that is a fantastic theory. But any great theory in finance needs rock-solid proof. So how did they actually test this? This is where the paper gets really clever with its research design. They didn't just run a simple regression. They found a real-world natural experiment. What they did was they looked at data from tons of countries over a 22-year period. And they identified these moments where countries made major sweeping reforms to their labor laws. This created a perfect setup, because now you have a treatment group, firms in countries that suddenly changed the rules, and a control group of firms in countries where the laws stayed the same. It's like a real-world science experiment. To analyze this experiment, they used a super powerful statistical method called difference in differences, or DID. Now, this is crucial for your exam. DID is one of the best ways we have to get at actual cause and effect. It lets you isolate the true impact of the law change by netting out all the other background noise that might be happening in the global economy at the same time. Here's how it works, nice and simple. First, you look at the treated countries. You measure their corporate leverage before the reform and after, and you calculate the change. That's delta T. But wait, maybe leverage was changing everywhere for other reasons, right? So you do the same thing for the control countries that didn't change their laws. That change is delta C. The real causal effect of the law is the difference between those changes, It's delta T minus delta C. It's the change on top of the background trend. So clean. So, the moment of truth. We've got the theory, we've got the experimental setup. What did they actually find when they ran the numbers? Does the data show the smoking gun? Let's take a look.
And here it is. This is the big one. They find that after a country passes a major reform that increases worker protection, firms on average cut their debt-to-assets ratio by 1.87 percentage points. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but for the median firm in their sample, that's a reduction in leverage of about 10%. That's not just statistically significant, that is an economically massive effect. It's huge. This chart basically tells the whole story in one simple picture. On the left, you see the firms in countries that got treated with the stricter law. Before the reform, their leverage is at some level. After the reform, boom, it drops significantly. Meanwhile, you look over at the control firms, the ones where nothing changed. Their leverage just kind of putters along, basically flat. The difference is just stark. It's crystal clear that the law is driving the change.
Okay, so that's a powerful result. But great researchers always push it one step further. They want to make sure the story makes sense. So they asked, if this effect is really coming from labor rigidity, it shouldn't hit all firms the same way, right? It should be much stronger for firms where labor is a more critical, flexible input.
And that is exactly what they find. This is the clincher. The reduction in debt is significantly bigger in industries that naturally have high labor turnover. Think retail, restaurants, that kind of thing. And why does that matter? Because for those firms, the ability to hire and fire flexibly is a core part of their business model. So when a law takes that flexibility away, it's a massive shock to their operating risk. This result confirms that the mechanism is working precisely through the labor channel, just like the theory predicted. It really seals the deal. Okay, let's bring it all home. After all that, what are the absolute must-know takeaways from this study for your exam? Let's boil it down.
Here are the 4 points you need to have down cold. Number 1, the hypothesis. Strict labor laws act like an increase in fixed costs, which boosts a firm's operating leverage. 2, the mechanism. This new labor debt forces firms to reduce their financial debt to keep their total risk from exploding. That's the crowding out effect. 3, the methodology. They use a clever difference in differences design to get clean causal evidence. And 4, the result. More protection for workers leads to less debt on corporate balance sheets. Simple as that. Look, if your brain is totally fried and you can only remember one single thing from this entire paper, make it this sentence. Financial debt and labor debt, that is, the implicit cost of rigid labor contracts, are substitutes. When government policy forces a firm to take on more of one, the firm will actively choose to take on less of the other to balance its risk. They are two sides of the same coin. And that really leaves us with the big final thought. This paper is about so much more than just debt. It's a powerful demonstration that social policies, things we think of as being about fairness or workers' rights, can have profound and often completely unexpected consequences inside the world of corporate finance. So if labor laws can reshape something as fundamental as capital structure, what else are they doing? What other decisions are they influencing? That's the door this research opens, and it's a pretty important one.